Welcome to the Archaeology Studio. Today's episode considers stonework sites, monuments, and ruins. These creations and their surviving remnants can be found in diverse landscapes around the world. They have become permanent, or at least long-lasting parts of their associated places. In the broadest sense, stonework sites refer to constructions made of stone as the primary raw material that still has survived through time in the archaeological record. The original constructions may have involved numerous kinds of building materials, but the stonework has survived as the primary component that still can be seen in the archaeological sites or ruins today. Stonework sites are appealing in archaeology for at least two major reasons. First of all, in practical terms, these sites tend to be large and durable, and therefore they can be accessed and studied more easily than would be possible for cases of subsurface layers of broken artifacts and dispersed middens. Second, toward developing intellectual research questions, the surviving materials of stonework sites can retain or reflect aspects of the physical and social setting that otherwise could not be ascertained in other archaeological evidence. Stonework sites may refer to old houses or whole villages, or they may be monumental constructions for ritual ceremonies, expressions of status, or other specialized purposes. All of those possibilities can generate productive research projects. When examining stonework sites in their modern conditions, these surviving remnants can be recognized as partial views or reflections of the original ancient context. In this regard, at least some knowledge of archaeology is helpful for visualizing what the sites may have looked like during their original time periods of cultural use. Usually, pieces of wood, thatch, or other perishable components have disintegrated long ago, yet these stonework elements have endured in the archaeological record of the landscape. Similarly, the ancient contexts probably included assorted plants and trees, as well as potentially some animals, and of course people, yet the specific identities are no longer detectable today. Stonework sites often are visible on the ground surface. Typically, these stonework elements have been decayed into ruins, and the sites have been covered to some extent by newer layers of sediments and vegetation growth. Even with the factors that have degraded or obscured these sites, these surviving stonework components are obvious and easily detectable through surface inspection, reviews of historical maps, analysis of satellite imagery, and test excavations. Sometimes stonework ruins are discovered entirely beneath the modern ground surface, and the only way to learn about them is through exploratory excavation. Nonetheless, these constructions are obvious whenever they are uncovered. In terms of basic documentation of stonework sites, the major effort involves simple mapping and recording. Most people will want to see plan view maps, section views, scaled illustrations, and photographs. Modern technologies now allow other options such as video recordings and three-dimensional digital registration of sites. These results are not always realistic to publish on a printed page or in a book, but they can be helpful for data analysis and possibly for creating virtual museum exhibits for public appreciation. Stonework sites could be composed of individual large stones, or they could include numerous smaller stones in organized constructions. The individual stones can be described in terms of their geological origin. material density, measured dimensions, color, texture, degree of angularity or roundedness, and other physical properties. Often, people gathered stones from the immediate surroundings of a site. Typically, the expedient local collecting of stones would be suitable for constructions made of numerous small pieces and perhaps just very few larger pieces of stones. In some cases, stones were chosen from specifically desired geological sources, and those stones may have been transported for some distance. Transported stones always offer at least one special characteristic that could not be found among the stones that exist naturally around a site. The special characteristic could be the color, texture, size, or other physically observable trait of a stone. Alternatively, the special characteristic could involve a social or cognitive function that could not be detected through physical observation today. Often for transported stones, the individual pieces were quarried from their natural sources. Artificial cutting marks can reveal the toolkits or other aspects of the quarrying and working process. Considerable information can be learned through studying the quarrying sites, and sometimes intermediary workstations. Softer stone material, such as sandstone or volcanic tuff, can be shaped easily into blocks or other forms. Similarly, laterite can be worked into a desired shape while it still is wet, somewhat like working with wet concrete before it dries and solidifies. All of these kinds of softer stones potentially could be used for creating tightly fitted stonework constructions. Moreover, these surfaces could be worked into artistic designs of statues or other carvings. Harder stone material, such as limestone or volcanic stone, could be chipped or processed into some degree of artificial shaping. In fact, many limestone sources around the world have been quarried and shaped extensively, even when using simple stone or shell tools without the physical advantage of metal tools. Construction technique depends mostly on the goals of the stonework feature. Different techniques would be suitable for a foundation, a pavement, a freestanding fence, a load-bearing wall, a pillar or column, or a roof. Usually, the visible exterior surfaces are constructed more carefully, while the unseen interior cores may have involved less attention to detail. Accordingly, one popular technique is called core filling, wherein the interior cores are filled with loosely organized rubble, and the visible exterior surfaces are made with tightly fitted pieces and with overall smooth or straight sides. Another technique is called multi-stacking, wherein all of the stones are piled in roughly equal format. The exterior surfaces still might be modified with more attention for their outward appearance, but the overall mechanical properties are consistent throughout the construction. In many parts of the world, a binding material or mortar was applied for extra strength. In other places, though, people have created raw stonework or dry stone masonry without any binding agent or mortar. Through time, all stonework constructions have decayed or degraded. Any associated wood, thatch, or other perishable material probably disintegrated after some decades, unless the site somehow was preserved through waterlogging or other unusual circumstances. Even with specialized preservation conditions, the individual elements of stonework and other components probably have been disaggregated or dispersed to some extent. In most settings, stonework ruins have lost some of their mechanical integrity due to numerous factors, such as vegetation growth through the site, trampling by people and animals, pooling or flow of water, exposure to natural erosion, or overburdening loads of newer sedimentary layers. If you can learn more about stonework sites or elements in modern contexts, then you may be able to apply some of this knowledge into archaeological contexts. The parallels between ancient and modern contexts should not be mistaken as perfect continuity. Rather, the historical and modern observations may reveal aspects about certain basic mechanical functions or physical properties that always could be applied. For instance, you might observe how a tree root can grow and create fracturing patterns inside stonework. Next, you could learn how to identify similar fracturing patterns in other settings and locations, including examples in variable archaeological contexts. After you know the basic physical description of a stonework site, then you can develop interpretive ideas about what the site could represent in terms of a social organization, political structure, or other aspects of the ancient people who were associated with the site. As I mentioned earlier in this video, stonework sites have attracted many scholars, specifically for the potential to interpret aspects of a society that may have been retained or reflected in stonework ruins. Ideally, proposals about past societies could be tested against real data observations in archaeological sites. For these reasons, if the basic description is limited or incomplete, then the potential for interpretation logically is questionable at best. If you can make more thorough and extensive observations, then logically the more robust primary data sets can support more confident interpretive conclusions. You might consider the question that you want to address about a stonework site, and then you could identify what primary datasets would be necessary toward addressing your question. For example, do you want to study how stonework sites reflect kinship structure, social status, labor organization, or political relationships? What evidence would you need to find toward testing those ideas? If you already are aware of the basic site documentation, then you should be able to identify the range of questions that could be addressed. For example, if you know that some stonework features involve more specialized construction than others, then you might be able to formulate ideas of differential status or social functions of those sites. You still would need to test and refine your hypothesis, but at least you could start with a concept based in the reality of the available evidence. In concluding this episode, now you should be familiar with how to describe stonework sites. And you can consider how the physical descriptive content may or may not support an interpretation or hypothesis. Moreover, you could develop more details for studying stonework sites in the particular cases of your interest. Please remember to subscribe to this channel, share with your friends, and explore more online videos with the Archaeology Studio.